Hello and welcome to the Chocolate Podcast. I'm your host, Ed Easton. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host and the man behind Melt Chocolates, Andrew Nason.
Hi, Ed.
Today we're going to be looking at, we're going to be talking about something called the Capivara Caves. Find out exactly what those are and why they're so important when we think about chocolate. We're going to be looking at the first Europeans to explore the Amazon, how it got its name. And the grisly and not so grisly fates that those intrepid Europeans got to. First of all, how are you, Andrew? Recording this about a week before Easter, and I'm sure things have been pretty busy.
Yeah, this is a really interesting podcast, I think.
Thank you.
This is...
I agree. I love it.
Yeah. This is going to be groundbreaking and, earth-shaking. Because I think we've got some really quite big reveals coming up as we go. We go through the story, and of course, Ed, we have to put you somewhere.
I've always got to be put somewhere. Yeah, I can't be allowed to rest on my laurels. What am I going to be on this week's episode?
Yeah, there's certainly. I think hopefully our listeners would agree that you fit certain personas really well.
Yes, I do.
The
Normally
amoeba,
it's worms, worms and slugs and bugs. Yeah, I'm very good at those.
And the other
trees.
area,
I was a tree last week. I really enjoyed
that you do well is, being a troglodyte. That seems to, you fit the method acting pretty well. And I'm sure you've spent the entire week preparing for your caveman act by living in a cave to get into the right zone.
If you saw sort of my bedroom on a Tuesday evening when I might not have got around to tidying it. I think a cave would be a generous way of describing that. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're basically a Paleolithic troglodyte.
What do you mean by troglodyte?
A troglodyte is somebody that lives in a cave.
I thought it was like a camel. I thought it was like someone that had two
toes.
toes.
No, I think you're getting mixed up. No, a troglodyte is
a cave dweller.
A cave dweller, I'm not throwing any aspersion.
I've never seen a man say that and look more in his eyes like have an aspersion, Ed.
Look, let's be honest. If there's saber-toothed tigers out there living or decorating a cave makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah, for sure, 100%. And it's freezing cold. I mean, if saber-toothed tigers are around, I assume we're in the Ice Age here.
Yeah. So we want to explore these caves and understand the journey of the Amazon, and I think they illustrate, no pun intended, some really fascinating things about the world and about us. And I thought we'd approach it by kind of, asking you some questions as to why you painted them and what you're doing.
Just for context, when you talk about caves and cave painting in the Amazon, we're talking about caves and sort of sites found in the kind of Capivara National Park, which is part of the Amazon and features this massive array of ancient and beyond ancient cave art and wall art. Capivara obviously means capybara because you can find capybaras in this national park, but you can also find lots of really important artwork too. Sorry, I'm now back in character. I'm a troglodyte, as you say.
Yeah. So the first question, Ed, we have for you. You're between 30,000 and 70,000 years ago. BC, right? Yeah. This is a phenomenally early time. And the first question I have for you...
they thought that then? They thought, oh, God, we're early. Yeah. We are really early now. I think not be too early.
Well, my first question, is what the hell are you doing there? Because the archaeologists and all the scientists believed that you weren't there until 13,000 years when you walked across the Bering Strait. So we don't understand... Well, I'm going to ask you directly, as a troglodyte, where the hell did you come from?
I assume, like all, I wouldn't have done it, but my ancestors would have sort of walked over there. Pretty much. Well, I'm going to guess from when it was all sort of one big blob and then it sort of separated.
I mean, it could be that you came from Africa. It could be that you came from Australia by boat. We don't know.
Boat?
By boat, yeah.
That's mad. Do you think they came by boat?
Well, it's possible. I mean, we don't know. This is the question. I don't think anybody has the answer.
No.
How did you get there? And you clearly don't either.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's tricky.
Which is proving my point that you are in a perfect caveman.
Yeah, clueless. In the dark. Literally in the dark, yeah. But would they have known? I feel like they just would have been like, oh, we're here. We're, I don't know.
Well, they would know that, their ancestors came by boat or, walked over the Andes or walked across the Bering Strait down, the Ice Mountain.
Yeah,
I think
why couldn't they have done that just before we thought they did?
Because I believe, the Ice Age
It
was
had to
there.
freeze over, right?
Well, let's go through, what you painted. And what are the key themes of what you painted?
Well, we spoke about this a bit last week, but a lot of what we're talking about is nature.
What do you mean by... You wouldn't have called it nature.
Why not?
You're a caveman.
Why would I have not called it
What
nature?
did you put on the walls?
Why would I have not called it nature? I definitely would.
Because I think you're connected. You don't have that distinction as a caveman. That's a modern word. The distinction.
I don't know any caveman though. I mean, yeah.
Ed, I'll help you out. You basically
things
had
in the natural world.
As far as I can see, you had two things on your brain.
And then the celestial. I think it was the mix of those two things.
You had food, which is all the animals, and sex. Basically, those we know that the two things that you care about the most.
Yeah.
Are feeding your stomach and sex.
And the stars as well, and things going on up above.
Yes, fair point. There is, you were the first indication that you were an astrologer, and you had looked at the stars.
I think it's a generous astrologer. I mean, I was just drawing a little picture of a star. I mean, is my nephew an astrologer? Maybe he is.
So, I'm interested in what food hunting scenes, this is kind of across cave. Obviously the food was kind of quite a major theme. It's like you in modern day world drawing a picture of a pizza or a Dorito. That is their equivalent, right? So what did you paint on the wall? For our listeners who haven't got access to the actual cave paintings that you worked on, what were they?
I mean, trees.
No, we're talking animals, Ed. We haven't got to a tree yet.
No, there are plants. There are...
Yeah, okay, so let's hold that for a second. You painted the first ever depiction of a tree.
Yeah.
It's the first botanical drawing in human history. This is a really big deal, and I don't think there's another one for 50 or 60,000 years.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that we know of, I guess, is the
far.
Yeah,
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was the first one, and there's quite a lot of firsts as well in the Capivara National Park. It's like, as you said, the first sort of people to do stuff that we think might represent the stars and celestial bodies as well. But yeah, I think that's why, to be fair, I don't just think of that stuff as food. I think they weren't just looking at a tree and thinking, yum, let's get it down, I bet that's delicious. In the same way they weren't looking at the stars and thinking, yum. I do think it was a sort of an attempt to sort of map and study the things that are around them for reasons that might be more important than just, oh yeah, this is something we eat.
Well, Ed, I completely support you here because I think, but you have to explain yourself because there is a tree. And you have to explain why you've all got the most enormous erections around that tree, Ed.
Well,
I mean, can you...
It's complicated. It's private.
Why is it complicated?
It's private. It's complicated.
Why?
We don't know. I mean, obviously, things like trees and nature and spirituality are often linked to things like sex and virility and stuff like that.
Oh, I'm looking.
Of course they are. Yeah,
what are you
absolutely.
talking about?
Yeah, of course,
I've never connected a plant to sex before.
Read the first book of the Bible. What's that book about? It's about essentially in Genesis, in Eden, you have this big tree that represents sin, and Adam and Eve are walking around naked. They eat from the tree, and then bang, they're aware of their own naked bodies. They're aware of their sexual beings. Fundamentally, that act of eating fruit from that tree is linked to sex and virility in the most famous religious text worldwide. Like that.
No, but that's, I mean, I'm going to reject that 100%. Because you're a troglodyte from the Amazon. They didn't have that concept of sin. Obviously, in that example, they had the women who gave the apple to the men, and they introduced sin into the world.
I'm not saying it's the same. You just asked me. You just said you've never thought of things like virility and sex linked to things like spirituality and the natural world. And I think it's no surprise that those things are intertwined. I think so often when you look at, I don't know, people in the past and the way they thought about themselves and the natural world as sort of, I don't know, things that recreate themselves and reproduce, those things are inherently linked to sort of ideas of the divine.
Okay.
So it wasn't just a case of, I don't know, draw a tree and draw us having our erections out. I'm defending ourselves as cavemen. This is a complicated spiritual image and of a spiritual ceremony that you modern folk might not understand.
Okay, I'm gonna, here's our first big reveal. That tree is a cocoa tree. It's a chocolate tree. And the reason I think you've got an erection, and all your colleagues have, your fellow cavemen, is because cocoa pods, as we know, have got a certain assimilation to breasts on a woman, and they point directly out of the trunk. I think they're called cauliflorus or something. And I think you were painting a cocoa tree.
Okay.
And I can make further proof of that by taking the culture that you started as a troglodyte 70,000 years ago and looking at later cultures and discovering that they still thought the cacao tree was sacred and they still worshipped it. So there may be, and this is a world first, a direct line between that first tree and you worshipping it with later cultures that continue to worship the cacao tree.
Yeah, and we do know that the sort of the cacao tree, or the descendant of the sort of modern cacao tree that once it was sort of cultivated by Amazon people, was growing naturally in the Amazon basin. We know that's its origin. Yeah, I mean, Andrew and I, if you go back on previous episodes, you'll have seen we've been lucky enough to try the pulp from these cacao pods. So this is not chocolate in any way. This is not anything to do with process. This is literally like the fruity pulp that comes out of alongside the cacao pods. And it's so nice. It's delicious. It's extraordinary, full of really, really interesting flavours and chemicals and stuff. And yeah, I think like it's no surprise that when you look at them, as I mentioned, having this what looks like a ceremony and representations of virility and sex and life around this tree, what better tree to put forward than the cacao tree in the area? I mean, it was.
So we're saying, and this is a first, the first botanical illustration or the first plant or the first tree ever illustrated by mankind was a cacao tree.
In our opinion.
In the opinion of somebody that was there.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
You are there and you're telling me.
I drew it, yeah, and it was.
Yeah, you drew it.
Yeah, I mean, devil's advocate, could it have been? I mean, I try to think about some other decent trees in the area.
Okay, so we're going to make another second big reveal.
Oh, yeah?
If you're going down a devil's advocate route. Because I'm going to make the point. You talked about the women and children that would have selected the cacao pod.
Did I?
And used the fruit and enjoyed it.
Oh, yeah.
As we did. But the men were doing something different, most likely, we think. And they were using the sweetness and the sugar in the juice to create alcohol, right? So there's a very good expectation that women and children were using the fruit like a sweet, and the men were getting drunk,
fermenting,
on the and basically selecting those. It could be that it was selecting the trees to look like females. It could be, because it's quite odd that the pod grows directly, vertically out of the trunk. That's quite odd. And secondly, we think they were probably selecting them for alcohol. Right.
It's interesting. Yeah, I think it's an interesting theory.
So here's the next theory. As a troglodyte, 70,000 years ago, the first human on Earth to illustrate a tree, if you were getting pissed a lot,
Yeah.
I don't think you could be bothered to paint, right? If you were doing a lot of ayahuasca and getting high,
Yeah.
I think you would be too high and off your face to paint.
I don't know. I don't know
think
if I agree with that.
we're creating a very interesting correlation between chocolate and creativity and art. So spin it on its head and say that it's chocolate that makes people artistic, creative, etc. And all the other drugs are kind of either too extreme or too off your face. I don't know what a good word for that is.
Yeah, I mean,
To actually help the human mind being creative. This is a second big reveal.
I think when you look at the history of art and also like art theory about the origins of art, you mentioned things like ayahuasca and sort of mind-altering substances. Those absolutely, I think you could make the argument, actually encourage artistic creation. I agree. Like,
Wait. If you've got snot and vomit coming out of your mouth, you ain't
no,
putting anything on a cave.
you're like obviously not.
Even if you are a troglodyte.
Not then, but I mean, absolutely. Even in sort of in modern ayahuasca use in South and Central America, particularly in South America, modern ayahuasca use and historical ayahuasca use are massively linked to art and sort of pattern design and things like that. I don't know if you can say like cacao is the only stimulant that enhances like artistic endeavor.
I'm
and
going
the
to make the
artistic
case
process.
here that it is the perfect stimulant. It's got the right amount of caffeine. It doesn't put you off your face. It's got a dopamine enhancement, and it helps creativity in mankind. And of course, I've got support from this. You know, you merely have to look at the West and the arrival of coffee and chocolate into Western society, and you've got the Age of Enlightenment, you've got the penny universities. You know, we can see it happen in the West. So why didn't it happen to you as a caveman 70,000 years ago?
Going back to ayahuasca, we know about its importance in artistic tradition. But to be fair, a lot of the art on ayahuasca, you sort of the intended image from the person on ayahuasca and what it looks like in the cold light of day are often quite different.
Correct.
Hence why
Correct.
it's often quite abstracted, quite pattern-based, that sort of thing, not always. Whereas I guess if you're having cacao as opposed to, I don't know, loads and loads and loads of coca or ayahuasca or mushrooms or loads of, I don't know, fermented berries, etc., or fermented honey or whatever you'd be trying to get your rocks off. I suppose if you sort of think of these illustrations as, I don't know, more like scientific illustrations, like I'm going to draw a tree, I'm going to draw our predators, I'm going to draw the animals that we're hunting, so as a way of almost mapping these things scientifically, as opposed to purely a creative process. Yeah, I think cacao would be a great thing in order to sort of push you on that. But
can you help explain? I want to dig into these animals a bit because I believe you painted a giant sloth.
Yeah.
And there are toxodonts.
Sorry?
Large rhinoceroses.
Well, I've heard of those, yeah.
Yeah, but you painted them, so you could better tell me what.
Yeah, large.
Like, did you see? Like, the question I have for you is, did you see them? Because that dates you, what must be back to 70,000 years ago, or did you imagine them because you were high on chocolate? And there are camelids, and there's a saber-toothed tiger. I mean, there's some pretty interesting stuff. And I guess one of the key questions is, did you see them, or did you imagine them?
It's hard. I don't think imagined them is possible, right? I mean, you have to. I did. Either I saw these things firsthand and experienced them. That seems by far the most likely, right? I mean,
I think so.
But
yeah.
I guess the only other possibility that I, as me, can put forward is that I know these entered into sort of folklore and that were able to be sort of passed down, I don't know, 7 or 8 further generations. So I don't know, my great-great-great-grandparents saw saber-toothed tigers and giant sloths, and so described them, and they drew them, and those illustrations obviously we don't have, but somehow that tradition was sort of passed down. In the same way you get things like, I don't know, illustrations of dragons, because previous generations have illustrated dragons and etc. It doesn't necessarily mean we have dragons now or ever, but I think that seems a lot more far-fetched than just being like, yeah, these illustrations are from that period.
And that dates you, doesn't it? Because I think, we've got the extinct American horse
Sure.
that you painted. You've got a saber-toothed tiger, as we've said. You've got massive rhinoceroses. You've got the giant sloth that seems to hit somebody, knocks them. Yeah. I mean, is obviously you were traumatized by a giant sloth.
They're so scary. I implore anyone to have a look at images of what they would have looked like. They're like 3 meters tall. I think they're more like bears. They've got big sharp claws, long sort of snouts. They're like sort of an anti-to-bear sloth.
But I don't understand why you didn't just move away. They don't exactly move fast.
No, I think your modern brain is too attached to our idea of a sloth, which are these sort of, I don't know, super lazy. No, a giant sloth, that'll get you.
Well, you're saying that moves fast.
Not necessarily fast, but I mean, I'm not exactly, I don't know, rapid. But yeah, I mean, it will come and get you, and once it gets you, it might sneak up on you as well.
So, Ed, the other question I have for you, as a cave dweller,
yeah,
I'm going to call you an Amazonian for now, if you don't mind.
That's confusing to me because I don't know that word, but I like the sound of it.
Yeah, why did you do so much sexual drawings? I mean, there's a lot. And there are a lot of men with a huge phallic.
Sorry,
I need to know.
I feel
is it the first ever dick pic, or is it what is the purpose of all that sex?
I mean, if I was sat here in the pantheon of great artists, and I've got, I don't know, Picasso on one side of me, I've got Michelangelo on the other side, I've got the ancient Greeks behind me, I've got, I don't know, Hockney, I've got Emin. I mean, sex and the human body is the artistic subject, right? It's the primary artistic subject. It is what we are, stripped down to its simplest
But I
form.
think it's possible you're a Paleolithic pornographer.
My art is not porn. I think it limits it. Would you call Michelangelo's David porn? No, you would not.
Well, I mean, look,
that's
I don't mean to get graphic, but what the hell are you doing with that animal?
I think that one's I think is a misunderstanding. I think I'm just close by, and I may be holding a stick at an awkward angle. I don't know, right? Some things get lost in translation.
Yeah,
I painted these things an awful long time ago.
Well, maybe you were just closer to nature and you didn't really distinguish.
But look, in all honesty, it's no surprise that those are the things that these people were painting. I mean, they're like the human body and sex and reproduction. That's the most important thing. It's the most interesting thing.
Yeah, so we're back to sex and food, basically, other than the tree, which I think symbolized something more important.
And the stars, I think, as well.
And the stars. Yeah. That was the first sign of, maybe you are the mother culture for all other cultures that came in the Americas. Yeah, and that's our proposition. I think it's time to change, because, we've got your motivations as a cave dweller.
Sure.
I think we've got it down. Is the two things we've said. This world was a different world to the one that we inhabit, and the two collide in a really dramatic way. And so I think it's time that you become a monk.
Well, yeah. So, which was fast-forwarding here about 70,000 years.
Yes.
But yeah, in the second half of this episode, what I think it's really important to speak about is, in our last episode, we sort of spoke about the Amazon in a really loose sense and understanding those people and civilizations that sort of came, again, much after the sort of ancient, sort of prehistoric people of sort of 7,000 years ago, but the way that the Amazon was sort of cultivated, and we talked about sort of using the jungle as a sort of a natural farm and growing in it in a way that's super alien to really any culture, but especially Western culture, and quite deliberately Andrew last week, we didn't want to define everything through the terms of essentially when the West arrived, and most specifically when the Spanish conquistadors arrived, because so often that's where the story starts, and in reality that's in many ways where the story starts coming to an end. I mean,
yeah, correct. And you're absolutely right. We wanted to talk about the indigenous cultures and the indigenous cacao pre-Columbian.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important, and I think hopefully we've done it justice.
Yeah. So it's a good point today. If you haven't listened to that episode, it should be the one that's just before this one. Do go and give it a listen. But we sort of wanted to bookend it in this episode, so you can sort of get the before that led into it, and then the after, the sort of the I don't want to say the word the fall, because a lot of these peoples and these languages and these cultures are still spoken today, but certainly the arrival of the Spanish was a sort of cataclysmic event for the Amazonian people and Amazonian cultures. Again, as mentioned last week, the Amazon's absolutely enormous, and so when you're talking about Amazonian culture, it's always going to be a sort of very, very distilled version of something super, super, super complicated. But yeah, it's a really important subject, partly because a lot of these explorers and conquistadors actually wrote stuff down. They described what they saw. So as historians, it's really, really, really useful to read these things, and because they are the earliest written accounts that we really have of first-hand experience of Amazonian peoples, Amazonian cultures. And yeah, they tell a really, really, really great story. So we're in sort of 1540 here to base us.
Let's put you in character. You're going to be Gaspar de Carvajal.
Well, yeah, I want to build into Gaspar, because it's sort of a fun. Obviously, Gaspar and Orana are the two sort of super famous and successful navigators and mappers of the Amazon. They, as you'll find out later, they were involved in naming it. They were involved in detailing a lot of the people there. But how they got there, how those two people and the sort of the 48 other blokes with them, is super interesting. Pizarro, the sort of the great or terrible conquistador, depending on how you look at it, he essentially got his brother Gonzalo Pizarro, his younger brother, and he went, "Okay, mate, I've had enough of you. Can you go off and basically find the Amazon?" It was his job, because they thought there might be cinnamon there.
Yeah, they thought it was the land of cinnamon, and they thought they'd find El Dorado.
Yes.
So the kind of, the impetus to 99.9% of the conquistadors is money and land.
I think you can round that up to 100. I've not found anyone who was.
Yeah.
Not even.
And they basically say, look, if you get the gold from that land, you can be the governor, and that's the deal.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's quite simple. But I also want to pick up an aspect of where you're from, because I think this is really important. Extremadura in Spain, which is quite
good name.
Yeah, it's quite a poor area. Generally speaking, you weren't literate.
Pizarro, yeah.
Pizarro was not literate. He could not read or write.
And this is neither brother could read or write.
Yeah, and this is really important. You could, as a monk, Dominican monk, you could read or write, but my point is, you all come from a very poor, illiterate area of Spain.
Yeah, it's a really good point. These weren't sort of. Obviously, they ended up being, a lot of them, incredibly successful, but they weren't. They were sort of chances. Similar to the gold rush in North America, sort of a couple of centuries later. These are people that didn't have great. Well, obviously, you need a degree of wealth to be able to, get a boat and sail across the ocean. But these were not sort of totally upper class people that had made it. These were people that wanted to be uber powerful, and as often in history, those people that are sort of on the cusp of success and desperate for it often form the most influential but also the most terrible figures in history, and depending on how you look at Pizarro, he certainly was. His brother Gonzalo Pizarro, his younger brother, was more of just a moron. So he basically set sail. It was about 450 people, of which Orana and Carvajal are on board.
Yeah, but wait, there's a really important detail, is Orellana joins the expedition late
Yeah.
and leaves early, as we're going to explain. And I think that's super important for the story to understand.
The way I see it is essentially Pizarro failed in finding the Amazon. I mean, he sort of said he did, but the furthest he got down the Amazon was basically a little estuary that goes into a big estuary that goes into the Amazon. So he essentially failed and went back, and most of his men, he went with about 450 Spaniards and around like 2,000 natives that they basically would bring to.
Yeah, this was the largest expedition on the Spanish, South American mainland for like 200 or 300 years. This was a major event.
And that's a lot. There's a lot. 450 people and then like 2,000 sort of following natives who, were, I think, treated very, very, very badly. Were basically led by Pizarro, to try and desperately find, as you mentioned, these potential cities of gold and lakes of gold and this cinnamon they thought just like randomly might be there. It's not, but they were dead hopeful.
Yeah, and I think when let's pick up the story when Francisco and Caspar decide to leave the party, and I think this is hotly debated. It was argued and fought over at the time. There's a very good case for saying that these two were treasonous, right? They took the only boat and left, Pizarro to basically die. And I think that is the weight of evidence is on you as Caspar. You basically abandoned the party and left them to die.
Yeah, I don't know. As you meant, that it is debated. What is true is that they were able to basically build these two Ballantines, these essentially Spanish military ships. The natives and the Spaniards basically worked together, and Francisco Orellana, who was this great explorer. Yeah, you're basically right. He essentially it does seem quite suspicious, right? When you talk about sort of treason, that you have this Pizarro guy who's got the name, he's got the power, and then sort of suddenly he's sort of sent off and dies a death
without a boat, right?
Yeah.
So you take the only boat, and I point that's the relevance of him joining the party late, and leaving early.
But
to be fair
to Orellana,
I think Orellana decides that this thing is a complete shit show, and he wants to get out.
That's the key. It was a complete disaster. They went from like 450 Spanish conquistadors, with, as I said, like 2,000 natives that they brought along with them as well, and like they just got murked at pretty much every stage. All we know about them is that they basically either like they would kill each other constantly, they would get lost, they would die in accidents, they would be shot constantly by natives who they couldn't really lay a glove on, and they basically ended up in a little estuary, as I said, that leads into another estuary that leads into the Amazon, and eventually Pizarro either went or was pushed. That's the end of the road for me. I'm turning back. And the two ships were left with this Francisco Orellana guy, and as you say, this monk, this writing monk,
who you are,
who I am. Yes,
you are a writing monk.
Me, I'm a writing
monk. And I
monk.
want you to tell us, as you head on your treasonous path, abandoning your colleagues from Spain.
I don't think it was.
Don't defend.
We are doing
you know that
work.
You're going to be settled up in Spain, and which is exactly obviously what happened. And you're going to tell a story that makes you look good.
Well, I think
that context.
Getting into the story is important, and it's interesting you use the phrase "telling a story" because I'm excited to talk about that after. But look. Me and Orellana, the sort of the new captain, we essentially decided, look, 450, that's too many. Anyway, most of them are dead too. So about 40 of us and about the same number again of natives go in these two Ballantine ships.
The only two boats, I might add.
Yeah, and these are not, I don't know, little rowing boats down the Amazon. These are complex Spanish warships. These ships are so elite and fast as well. But anyway, we take this and we navigate those 2 estuaries, and we finally manage to get to the Amazon. I mean, we arrive on the Amazon River, and essentially what I write about is seeing extraordinary things. The first thing that Caspar de Carvajal talks about is they just can't understand how big this thing is. They cannot comprehend, because I mean, you've got to bear in mind these guys come from Spain and more in Europe as well. There just aren't rivers anywhere near this size. I mean, they talk about it being sort of 2 leagues wide. You can't even begin to see the other side.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's basically they feel like they're going into. I mean, can you imagine you're just going down this just body of water that's so big you can't see either side of it. You've got no idea.
Correct.
And they write about that, and they are shocked and gobsmacked about that. And so,
I'm glad you said shot, because they will be.
Yeah,
shot.
The Amazon obviously it isn't always that wide. It narrows, and what they see when it starts to narrow, and what Caspar de Carvajal or what I write about in my diary is I talk about the things that you can see from the side of the boat. I don't think this is an important little asterisk in that the Amazon's massive. This is all you could. This was just stuff that he could see from the boat, and like occasionally they would venture off. But there are some amazing passages in my book. The most famous one being this. Andrew often says things are hotly debated. This is another hotly debated passage.
I think we're going to take it as you were telling the truth.
Well,
okay.
Well,
let's just take
for
it
now.
at that.
For now, yeah. For now, I think we can
throw doubt out, and you're telling the truth. Okay.
What I wrote in the passage, I talk about seeing these tall, white women, essentially.
They were very white and tall,
who have the strength of 10 natives. Essentially, is how I sort of quantify it.
I'll give you your precise words, just so you know. They fought in front of all the Indians. They were very courageous, and they fight as bravely as men.
Yeah.
And you also wrote, they go naked with their bows and arrows in their hands, and they do as much fighting as the men. They urged the men on and fought before them, and if a man did not obey them, they killed him. That's what you wrote.
Yeah, for sure.
So who were these naked, tall, white women?
I think
that shot at you.
In truth, we just don't know. Like, it's really hard with this sort of thing because it's literally just this random monk saying he saw this thing.
Well, Ed, he gives a lot, or you give a lot of detail.
Agreed.
And one of the things that you do, I think, incredibly well is how populous this place is. The number of people, you say that you can fire a crossbow and it will hit an Indian.
Yeah.
Because it was basically village after village, city after city.
Yeah, I think that's the thing.
And this is the key thing that we wanted to take.
He describes at one point they get off the boat because they see a incredibly well maintained and straight, basically road going sort of hundreds and hundreds of meters through the Amazon. They follow it. They find sort of walled cities. They describe things sort of stone towns and sort of populations built onto the banks.
We're not going to throw doubt on this. This is a genuine account by an eyewitness. Okay,
Yeah,
we can put whatever.
It definitely is.
But let's go with the story.
I think it is worth admitting that we are just taking a guy's word for it, and I think it is incredibly likely, and there is of course massive motivation that you would exaggerate. Like, there is a lot to be gained from it.
People can come to their own conclusions. Let's go with what he said, and it could be. I mean, we've discovered the painting of the tree, the argument that they may have had a different relationship with nature. Let's go with the argument that women were the rulers. Let's go with that for a sec. He says they have no husbands. They live by themselves. When they wish to have children, they go to the Indians. And if they bear a son, they kill him or send him away. And if it's a daughter, they bring them up. And he describes their cities, and he says that they were the dominant power, and the neighbors were frightened by this.
Yeah, I mean,
so, it could be that, women were the rulers, right? It could be
potentially
politically the most powerful, the top warriors, and they created a society that was dominated, and I think dominated politically and socially by women. And I think what's quite interesting is they had a different relationship with nature. I mean, they talk about the fruits they see and the food. They were just astounded how much food there was.
How much diversity.
How much diversity.
That
maybe this is a
last week.
woman-led society that had a different relationship with nature.
Yeah.
That could work with nature as opposed to dominate and destroy it.
Well, we know from last week. I mean, stuff like the way they were able to use the jungle as a place to, I don't know, plant trees in the wild and sort of cultivate it as sort of part orchard, part live and living jungle is extraordinary. 100% also, like, and again, this is not necessarily only based in Carver House writing, but we know that, I don't know, Amazon people, Amazon tribes, they absolutely do have different gender balances. They do have different than I don't know, 16th century Spaniards would have had. I guess, like, my point is with Carver House words is they would have framed stuff in the way that they understand, right? And they.
But that's why you might be astonished that women could rule successfully.
Right. But
you might be astonished that women could cultivate the Amazon when you have been brought up with sort of grasses and wheat. I think a lot of your astonishment might be that you can't imagine a women-led society with a biodiverse approach to agriculture.
I agree, but I think that's why then you need that when you get into stuff like, I don't know.
You are
killing babies and stuff, and it does seem that sort of bit is taken, it seems, directly from pre-existing myth. I mean, the Amazons.
I can understand
exist in myth before they exist in that description.
As a Dominican friar,
but
that you are going to find this very difficult to swallow, whereas I'm taking it as absolute gospel truth.
But I think that's mad. I think it's mad. I think those descriptions of essentially the Amazons, right? You talked about I don't know. And also they're confusing. You talked in there that they fight sort of alongside men, right? These were societies where women were doing the same things that men were and different. And I think that would have really, really confused the Spanish. And I think in that sort of confusion, and I don't know, the years later, that turns into essentially the Amazon myth, right?
Which is, of course, why it's called the Amazon,
exactly,
because,
right?
he basically names the Amazon.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same way, I don't know, people that... The Galapagos Islands, right? You go and you see the Komodo dragons and you go, I don't understand what that is, so I'm going to base it in myth that I do understand. And you're going to go back and say, oh yeah, there's fire-breathing dragons on this island. And it's sort of true.
I can accept the idea that there's a woman-led political society that dominated the area, was extremely successful, that had a different attitude to agriculture, that created a land of incredible plenitude, and I believe, because some of the detail is incredible. Like, this guy fires a shot bolt at a parrot or something to eat it, and the bolt from the crossbow flies into the water. And the guy, that's a disaster, right? They can't fish or catch fruit. 10 minutes later, the guy pulls up a big fish, and in that fish, they cut it open, is the crossbow bolt, and they're saved. So stories like that, the level of detail, this is an eyewitness account.
I have the complete opposite take from that exact same story. That is a mad story. That I'm not saying that definitely didn't happen. I'm not saying any of it.
I think at this point,
I just think when you've got one random monk who, as I said, had a massive motivation to big up what he found, because essentially They got to the end and they wanted money to go back again.
Okay,
right?
Monk, you're going to get shot in the eye now. Did you make that up? Or yes or no?
I say,
And I think you got shot in the eye by one of these angry women, and that's why you're so pissed off with them.
Oriana did definitely get shot in the eye. He
No,
wore an eye patch.
you got shot in the eye.
He wore a big eye patch. It's amazing.
The monk got shot in the eye as well.
Oh, maybe that's why we got on so well. I actually don't know. I genuinely don't know.
No, you got shot in the eye.
Yeah,
trust me. By the Amazonian women.
So hold on a
That's
minute.
why you're
Hold
so
on a minute.
upset.
The guy that you say we have to
can't-
trust gospel. By the way, I'm not saying this isn't true. I'm absolutely not saying that. I'm just saying.
Look,
I'm just saying this
Ed,
guy exaggerates.
Were
Not
you
only,
there?
Not only was
Were
he.
you
not
there?
Only was
He
a
was
big-
there.
He was blind. He couldn't even see. He was
You
looking
said
out
he
of
blind
one
in one eye.
No
The other
wonder.
eye worked.
Yeah. I think this blind monk. I don't think it's like the.
I
most...
think you're super harsh on this.
I am harsh. I am being harsh. But I look. Do I believe that basically it's I don't know. It's like if someone who went to the moon, right? Okay. And there were aliens there, and then the person came back and was like, "They're aliens," and here's something. It's the exact plot of Star Wars. You'd be like, "That's really weird." The aliens I can sort of believe, but I think you're sort of maybe simplifying this in terms that I understand. The Amazons and the Amazon myth pre-existed this story, and it is the same story. I think he saw female-led societies, empowered women who were fighting and cultivating, and he basically went, okay, but in order for me to understand it and for at home, I'm going to make them white, and I'm going to make them basically just the Amazons. And that's what I think.
Okay, so Ed, we're going to go. I'm going to take the counter argument that we've found a link, right? We know as a fact that the troglodytes painted the first tree, and we believe that first tree is a cocoa tree. We know that cocoa was a sacred tree across Mesoamerica. So we've kind of potentially identified the birth of the chocolate culture, to a cave in the middle of the Amazon. The second thing that we have through an eyewitness account is that there may well have been female-led political organizations that had a different approach to nature. And if you live
100%.
in the Amazon, it's not surprising. And we have evidence for that. Obviously, we've got the Giglyphs, we've got the Terra Petra. We know that they had an incredibly biodiverse approach to agriculture. So we've kind of got two strands we know. The third strand is that we now can link chocolate as the perfect stimulant for creativity and civilization. And we know that women were the workers of chocolate. So it's possible that cacao powered these women to a position of political dominance and also cultural civilization. And we then know that that translates itself because we can follow the genetics of the cacao tree all the way to Mesoamerica, and we see, the Criollo in Mesoamerica, and we see the Chuncho in the Amazon, which is the most genetically diverse. So in a way, what we want to do is link the growth of chocolate and the genetics of chocolate, which we can do now perfectly, to the absolute explosion of culture and art throughout the world. And that's really, and we can track it from this moment in the Amazon
From that little
with
tree.
you as a caveman
Yeah.
through these Amazonian women who clearly you're quite upset with because they shot you in the eye, all the way to Mesoamerica and the invention of the calendar. Ed, where does the largest pyramid in the world by volume stand? Where is it?
It's Mexico.
It's in Mexico. Exactly.
Oh, yeah, I've been. It's Chichen Itza, I think.
Yeah, it's the pyramid of Cholula is larger than the Egyptian pyramids, and what we are doing
enormous
here and now is linking that civilization and growth to the spread of cacao, and obviously the reverse of the corn and the popcorn.
going the other way.
If you have corn going one way and chocolate going the other, that is what we're saying is the spark that fires the bonfire of the civilization of America.
Yeah, I do think those accounts of the those first accounts of the Amazon they're a lot of fun. I think because it is just that one. That's all you've got. And like, I guess the reason why I'm a little bit dubious is like there are other accounts of like later that we know are made up, right? So Walter Raleigh famously went to South America looking for El Dorado, and basically drew a map of this lake, saying this is where El Dorado is. We've sort of seen it. We know it's there. He completely made that up. The lake doesn't even exist. Like there was a massive incentive for these people to go back to Europe and be like, look at all these insane, crazy things that are the same as the stories that you like. Give me another.
The problem is that we know
had.
that the Americans brought smallpox, and so we kind of now know that those civilizations were destroyed by disease.
Yeah, I think that's
and that's kind of, you know, the end of what could have been an alternative path for the world, right? It could have been an alternative path for the world. And I think, you know, there are what ifs of nature. What if that society hadn't been wiped out? Would we see a beautiful, civilized, completely different approach to agriculture than we have in the West?
For sure. And I mean, yeah, I think without a doubt. I do still think that like we still almost do have that in the way that those Amazonian peoples shaped over thousands and thousands and thousands of years, literally shaped the products that were growing in the Amazon, one of which is cacao. They literally were experimenting, mixing, planting in certain soils and stuff, these foodstuffs so they could be as delicious and amazing.
Yeah.
They weren't just cacao. And so I do think that, but yeah, I think those expeditions down the Amazon, and like, yeah, we've mentioned Orana and Caspar Carvajal, who are like, I don't know, they were sort of all right guys. Like, I mean, you mentioned, I don't know, into sort of conquistador politics, they probably did a bit of dirty work, but what they didn't do is go down the Amazon and just slaughter everyone they met, which can't be said of some of the other guys who we might talk about on later episodes. But yeah, I mean, it is while fascinating and interesting to explore those first sort of Western steps down the Amazon, that it is a journey that's lined with real tragedy, because you're right, sort of accidentally through smallpox and deliberately through, I mean, just massacre, deliberate sort of killing of not just of individuals but whole peoples. You're right, these civilizations weren't just gone, but actually people they were so diminished that when people came back 100 years later, they didn't believe they'd ever been there.
Correct.
It's only recently that those descriptions of those civilizations on the side of the Amazon are anything other than make-believe.
And you know, the tragedy is that we've got a double whammy, well, triple whammy. We've got the diseases, obviously, and it wasn't just smallpox. You've got the swords and steel of the conquistadors.
Yeah.
But thirdly, and probably even more tragically, which is impossible to imagine more tragically than smallpox and massacre, is you've got your church, because it went on a program of eradication that was more thorough than the steel of the conquistadors. And, you know, unfortunately, we've lost all that culture,
yeah,
you know, and it was
records.
Literally burnt. I mean, we know that, you know, they burnt the books of the Mayans.
And there are like, it still exists. I know a lot of these languages are still spoken, and South America has an
smoking. I think Ed,
smoking languages.
You're back in your caveman philosophy with, you know, and let's be honest, you had peyote. You know, you had these hallucinogens, and you had very powerful tobacco, didn't you?
Yeah.
I mean, like
crazy
this is
tobacco.
like full-on tobacco.
There's an amazing. We spoke about it on last episode, but our friend of the podcast, Dr. Ed Barnard, has a great episode on South Central and North American, sort of ancient American drugs and alcohol and stimulants that I recommend if listeners want to brush up and go listen to that. But it's a really good point that you make about the church. And I thought for a minute there when you were going to say, the most tragic part, I was certain you were going to say, oh, and we really ruined their chocolate by like putting milk and sugar into it. Which
I mean, you know, we were going to go there, but probably not now because we've hammered that
not
one.
Not on the same scale. But yeah, I hope that we've been able to, in this episode and in the episodes last week, I hope we've been able to sort of map the Amazon as this. I mean, it's more than a fulcrum. This sort of central point of so much of humanity and what we've talked about in this podcast, but even broader, from those early paintings, from that first image of the tree, from those, I don't know, drawings I did of blokes with their penises hanging out, all the way up until the modern day and modern society. The Amazon is the central sort of place of growth for so much that we sort of use and hold in our societies.
Can I end on one other note? You know, of a first, and you know, there's a really beautiful painting of the first kiss on these caves, and you know, this is a very emotional thing because we've scoured the world for 12 of the greatest kisses in art. And the earliest we could find was Giotto in the 14th century. And here you've got a kiss on a wall dating tens of thousands of years before that. I mean, so there's something very emotional going on. The other thing that I found unbelievably emotional was the hands in the caves in Lindos. You know, the multiple hands. I mean, if anybody could Google that, you know, it's a beautiful image. And I think, you know, that somehow I think we feel a stronger connection to those images, particularly, of course, the cocoa tree, the hands, the kiss. That connects you in a much more powerful way than, and this is going to upset you, a giant sloth. I mean, you know, I can't really connect with a giant sloth, but I can connect with the first ever representation of a human kiss. Yeah. The first ever representation.
I hate to burst your bubble, Andrew. As the caveman that painted it, it's actually just a headbutt. No, it is, and do go and have a look. Those watching and listening, do go look up the amazing artwork at the Capivara National Park. That's what you're going to want to type in because it is really amazing. And if you can go there yourself, I'd implore you to, because it is an extraordinary sight. Anyway, that is, I think, the end of our expedition down the Amazon. I think we've had a little bit of arrows firing both ways, which I've enjoyed. We've seen some pretty amazing things that I'm sure future generations won't believe we've covered in this episode.
You know, I didn't get an arrow in my eye.
No,
Ed.
You didn't. I got a few. I got a few.
You were shot up like a porcupine by Amazonian women, and you're not happy about it. I can see you are really, really not happy about it.
I've really, really enjoyed it. I think it's such a underappreciated part of the history we talk about. And yeah, I hope we've done it justice in both this episode and the episode from last week. So thank you, Andrew, and thank you those at home for joining us once again.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Bye.